Hello, everybody. Welcome to the CS Executive Brain Trust. We have had a hopping meeting here today where we've been able to come together as CS executives and talk about optimizing meetings for the neurodiverse. We're talking engagement, inclusion, post-meeting action, etc. We had a wonderful lightning talk given by Davida Fernandez. And subsequently after that, we went into breakout rooms to talk about what it's like and what we should do as leaders to better maximize our neurodiverse employees. We've got this wonderful panel in front of us here who's going to contribute some thoughts around what we discussed today. To frame up our conversation, though, I'd like to turn it over to our guest speaker, Davida Fernandez, to overview our discussion today. So, Davida, over to you, and then we'll jump into the panel.
Sure. I was diagnosed with ADHD over 11 years ago. Earlier this year, I was diagnosed with autism. This has really pushed me to start talking about this and educating in businesses and professional settings on what it means to be autistic and neurodiverse, basically in a professional setting. And we were talking about maximizing meeting participation, but also maximizing your employees, like their productivity, and looking at all of the things that people who are neurodiverse bring to the table that are positive rather than focusing on the negative, and what you can do to help them shine and be superstars in your business. Employees, I just got my list here. Creativity, deeply intuitive, insatiably curious, flexible thinkers. They can be laser focused and innovative problem solvers, and anything that you can do to help your employees, give them the latitude to flex these muscles, I think is a great way to start maximizing these people in your business. Is that kind of what we want to look at?
That's perfect, Davida. Thank you so much. It was a highly engaging conversation. And after you were done, we invited all of our participants to go into breakout rooms to dive deeper into that discussion on how do you maximize your neurodiverse employees? What are some of the things? What are some of the best practices that we can do? So with that, I'd like to open it up to our panel here. Just to kind of talk about that conversation or open up that conversation. What are some of the best ways to maximize our neurodiverse employees that you have found? Maddie, I can see you're off mute, and I'd like to turn it over to you and then over to Ashley.
Oh, don't turn it over to me. Go ahead, Ashley.
Oh, okay. Ashley, if you want to kick us off, that'd be great.
Awesome. I am ADHD, so I have the blessings of both. And one of the things that my key takeaway is like neurodiversity isn't a monolith. I like calling it neurospicy. It's just how we think and how we process information. So my biggest is understand and learn and have conversations with your team about where their strengths and skill sets. You don't have to map it in a way that's about, if they are neurodiverse. It's more so what do you need to win and what can we do to help? For me personally, I need more processing time. I need to be able to think through topics and come up with a decision. And that's something that I ask of my fellow leaders is to give that to me. I don't like to always be on camera or be on. And when we have in-person gatherings, I have food sensitivities and issues and different things I need accommodations for. Our recent all hands was at a beach. And I can't do sand. So I have real texture aversions to sand. So number one, just have conversations with what your needs are if you are part of the spicy crew. But if not, just talk to your team about what things they need to win and how they work best in meetings and create that space for them.
I would love to add on to that if that's okay. Ashley, that's such a good point. There's a lot of comorbidities that go along with neurodiversity, and a lot of them are physical. Not only aversions to sensory things, I have my own set of aversions to sensory things as well. But also I have something that's called EDS, which is Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a comorbidity with neurodiversity. Strangely enough, it's a connective tissue disorder. And like I've gone to, company meetings that were at bowling alleys, and they were like, hey, everybody's going to bowl and sign up. I'm like, I can't bowl. And they're like, oh, that means you're going to be the first one because you don't want to bowl. Like, don't do that. Like, listen, if somebody says they don't want to do something or can't participate in something, don't think that they're being shy. Like, just say, okay, we get it. You don't have to join in. So I think that was a really important thing to bring up, Ashley.
Thank you. Thank you both. That's great. Chris, you have some thoughts on this as well. And
Chris, you're still muted.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I was just going to say, from a personal standpoint, I was diagnosed about 8 years ago, despite my parents having taken me to be tested as a kid. Oh, he's fine. He's just very social. I'm on the very extroverted end of it. But one interesting point of note for folks who aren't aware is oftentimes there's confusion between what does ADHD and adult ADD mean. And the only difference really is that oftentimes as we get older, we are able to self-regulate out of that hyperactivity mechanism that can, as kids, kids have a hard time regulating that. Whereas adults, we realize, like, I feel like getting up and just kind of like, I'm like fired up. I feel like getting up and just kind of like moving around. Or we had somebody in the panel talked about, like, he's always pacing. He didn't think he was moving at all because he works remotely and he puts in over 6,000 steps a day because he realized he paces on calls. So I think I think, as we get older, we get much better at being able to regulate those things and the mechanisms and the tools that we develop over the years, and in many cases the decades, can become incredibly powerful tools to use in personal and business world. But I think getting to the point about what do you need, I think that's spot on for folks. And I'm very open about my diagnosis because it helps other folks understand how I work. But I also respect that privacy. So when you really think about it, asking anybody, what can I do to accommodate your needs, whether you know if they're neurodiverse, neurotypical, or anything, is a great way to approach managing people as individuals. But it can mean that much more when you're approaching somebody with neurodiversity. So I think it's a great way to just ask a question that's very neutral, non-labeling, but also can help you unlock a lot of those things that can be extremely beneficial to know about your neurodiverse colleagues.
So I'm Keisha, and I put in the chat that I was recently diagnosed within like the last month. And I think, like many of you have mentioned before, it just makes more sense why I'm so intuitive about what my team and my peers are experiencing. So what I've found that I've always done with my teams is I will ask them in their one-on-ones with me as I'm getting to know them, are you a succulent or are you an orchid? A succulent, do you just need a little bit of my attention, just to sprinkle on you a little bit, make sure you're on the right track, and you're good to go? Because if I go too hard, because I'm also an extrovert, is that gonna just totally overwhelm you and burn you out? Or are you an orchid where you need a little bit more of my time and attention, and I can slow things down for you? And I found that I get great responses with that. And I also tell my team when I'm meeting them that on an org chart, you report to me, but in my mind, I report to you. If you were an athlete, I'd be your agent. What does it take for you to feel comfortable and productive and valued in this role? And what obstacles are there that I need to be mindful of, or if possible, remove for you, so that you can be your most productive and most comfortable? Nobody wants to feel like they're constantly pushing a boulder uphill if you don't have to. So, that's how I lean in with my team. That's how I've always worked with my teams, because I realize I'm different and I can be a lot. And it's I have to and now it makes more sense as I'm learning about my diagnosis and have come into contact with more of my peers are saying, well, this is who I am too. And we're still different, and we're like piggybacking on each other's superpowers that are what make us different and unique. And that we just need like little different things to accomplish the goal together.
That's great. And I've heard over and over again and feel very strongly that neurodiverse people make excellent leaders. It's again, it's counterintuitive. A lot of people think that people who are on the spectrum, with social anxiety and maybe not understanding all of the social norms and how to navigate, the neurotypical world, but they make excellent leaders. And I think it's because we're so tuned in to what's going on around the world. Like we're really tuned in to I was saying to Paul earlier that, before my diagnosis, I always kind of self-described as an anthropologist in the human world. Like I felt like I was studying humans all the time because I didn't understand how to fit in. And so I had to study them to figure out what was going on. And I think that gives you a massive amount of empathy. And yeah, Maddie, I saw you nodding your head there.
Oh yeah, big time. I just to sort of, I'll lower my hand here, just to sort of follow up on both those points, which I thought were excellent. Chris talked about being really open about what's going on with him, and I just think that's I mentioned it in my breakout room, but nobody's here from there so I can repeat it. The best piece of advice I ever got about being a leader was that people will not listen to you and they will not let you help them unless they respect you and unless they trust you. And one of the ways that I think is really powerful to build trust is to be really open and vulnerable and courageous, in the sort of Brene Brown vernacular, about what's going on with us. So I'm certainly not diagnosed. I don't believe that I am necessarily ADHD, but I feel adjacent to a lot of what people are saying. I certainly understand the tendencies that people are talking about, and I do have social anxiety, and I'm quite open with everybody around my journey, my mental health journey around that. And I think that's really, it really helps people to trust you with their information and how their feelings, to be able to talk about yourself in that way and not feel like you're ashamed of it or worried about it.
Thanks for sharing that, Maddie. I totally agree. This has been incredible so far. Sarah, I'd like to turn it over to you, and then Chris.
Sure, thank you. Hi, my name is Sarah Harder. I have adult ADHD, also the most generalized anxiety disorder that is possible to have, which isn't neurodivergent, but has a lot of coping strategies in common. And I find those to be helpful when talking to people who have neurodivergent tendencies on my team. One thing that I think is really interesting, sort of maximizing potential, is if you ask somebody, do you like to be micromanaged? The answer is no. And no one wants to label themselves as a micromanager, but creating the tools and resources that walk people through internal processes step by step with screenshots for every step of the way is just an incredible resource to have for everybody on your team, for those who might be too anxious to say they don't remember something that you told them, or just can't quite remember, but also as a training tool and that kind of thing. So that is a resource that I really like to utilize for myself as well as other members of my team.
Awesome. We got some great thoughts. Sarah, looks like that triggered some great thoughts here. So let's go Kendra and then Kat.
I just wanted to add on to that topic that Sarah had about, having that documentation that's super thorough, because you don't want to ask somebody or admit that you forgot. We try to do that, but one thing that we also added at the request of the team years ago was, especially for a new hire, is giving them a peer mentor, somebody that's not in the leadership chain, it's not their trainer, it's just somebody else in their role that they can go and ask questions to. Because Sarah, to your point, You gave them a safe place to go ask the question that their trainer may be like, I taught you this on Tuesday. Or their boss may be, why don't you know this? This isn't, just a peer, just somebody who set up, they signed up to be this peer mentor, they want to do it, and they're not going to rat you out. And we've seen a ton of success with that.
Wonderful, Kendra. Thank you so much. Kat, did you want to add some things there?
I do, but mine slightly goes away from that topic. So I wanted to let Chris go first if his is still in line. You're still on mute, Chris.
You'd think that being that I deal with this every day, I'd finally figure it out. It's the end of the day, I'm a little tired. So anyway, we had, so one is on topic, but then one quickly goes off. So I thought what Maddie said about, being spectrum adjacent was great. I think it is, neurodiversity is, my wife has been in special education for her entire adult life. She works with all sorts of different kids in our public school system, but it's so different from one end of the spectrum to the other. And so you can have somebody who shares the same diagnosis, but it seems like the absolute polar opposite from somebody who has the exact same diagnosis. And so I think, I love the idea about a peer mentor, and then those questions about how can I, personalize this for you can be really, really impactful. And to that end, we had an interesting conversation in the previous session around the whole topic regarding on and off camera. And one of the ways, so there was some really legitimate feedback where, especially in a very, in a world where a lot of us are remote or hybrid, there is a lot of value to being able to see one another's faces. Even in this setting, it's really wonderful for me to put faces to the voices and see the nonverbal communications that happen. And so, one way to kind of bridge that I try to take is I just tell folks, I'd love to be able to see your faces and I'd love for everyone to see one another. But one, if you need to pop off camera at any time, you're absolutely entitled, at liberty to do that. So if people need to get up and move around, they can, or if they just need a break, they can. But I also kind of let them know, hey, if this really isn't comfortable for you, I'd rather you be here and present and participating than here on camera and unwilling to talk. And I just have to say, Davida, I almost laughed, I almost spit my lunch out because I went off camera because I was so hyper-focused all day. I went off camera so that at 4:20, I could eat my lunch while you were speaking. But I was off camera because of all the things that make me, that are related to my neurodiversity. So I appreciated you giving me the liberty to do that so I could actually eat my lunch at almost dinner time.
I was going to say, yeah, lunch at 4:20 is absolutely, I'm no stranger to that.
Awesome. Wonderful thoughts. Well, Kat, I'm going to let you finish up this great discussion here today.
Sure. So one of the things that I wanted to mention is I've been diagnosed ADHD since I was much younger in middle school. And I would never have talked about it in the workplace until I had employees who reported to me, bring to me that they were ADHD. And it finally made me realize that, wow, this person is an incredible employee. They're one of my star players, or this group is my star players. And I didn't realize I had so many neurodivergent people within that group. So it's given me the confidence to also share and talk about some of the ways that I manage my ADHD. One of the items that I haven't heard brought up here in this panel that Davida mentioned was that ADHD people tend to take on too many tasks, say yes too much. I find that it's a terrible, it's one of my biggest faults. I say yes way too much. And I have team members who also say yes way too much. And one of the things that we've been practicing together is realizing that one of the things that we need to take on as a task is giving other people the opportunity to take things on. So we really need to learn to say, I need to give this opportunity to somebody else needs this opportunity, instead of saying, I can't take this on, I have too much on my plate, being able to reframe it as another task that we are taking on as giving the opportunity to learn that and take on that opportunity to succeed in that area to somebody else. Give that to somebody else, not take it on yourself. We practice
Awesome.
saying it to each other too,
Hmm.
to make sure we're ready.
Such a great, Davida, do you want to respond to that and just kind of final thoughts?
I mean, just chef's kiss. That's all I have to say. It's just, it's so good. And I absolutely am excellent at overstretching myself. And I had a boss who also had ADHD, who basically sat me down and said, you gotta stop, you gotta stop. She's just like, I want you to only take on two projects this quarter. And I was like, okay, I'll see what I can do. And it was great. So yeah, that's great. I love that you actually practice it on purpose, intentionally. That's great.
Wonderful. I feel kind of bad shutting this conversation down, but we are unfortunately at time and we do need to wrap up. So folks, thank you so much for your authenticity. Thank you so much for your ideas and bringing some of these things to light. I hope that the audience watching has learned a lot and has been thinking more about how we can help our neurodiverse employees and better maximizing the benefits of what you get from having a neurodiverse team. Thanks for coming to the CS Brain Trust and all your contributions. We hope to see you in the future. And of course, we always want to thank our wonderful sponsor, Alan Rich, the founder of Y Meadows, for gathering us together. Thank you again, and we'll see you at the next month.
Hi, everyone.